2020 has been an interesting year for pro wrestling, but there have been a lot of really good moments and really amazing matches throughout the year. Here's my top 20 matches from 2020. Number 20, Bayley versus Sasha Banks from WWE's Hell in a Cell. Very physical, incredibly good storytelling between two of the best women's wrestlers on the planet. Number 19, Pac versus Kenny Omega from AEW Dynamite, February 26th. This was their Iron Man match and was a fantastic television presentation for AEW and one of the best matches, but oddly enough, not the best match Kenny Omega would have that week. Number 18, Cody versus Brodie Lee in a dog collar match. AEW Dynamite, October 9th. Coming off Brodie Lee's complete dominant win for the TNT title, this match was Cody's redemption. An all-out bloody brawl that just showed how incredibly brutal modern wrestling can be. Number 17, Will Ospreay versus Shingo Takagi, G1 Climax, September 27th. This will come off as a weird slight having it this low on the card, but I think part of it is the crowd reaction. But this told a really different type of story, as these were two more equals and both of them finding their way and cementing the fact that they are now heavyweights in the New Japan roster. Number 16, Finn Balor versus Kyle O'Reilly, NXT Takeover. This is as hard-hitting as a WWE match can get. Finn Balor broke his jaw. Kyle O'Reilly needed stitches. These two just put on a wrestling clinic. Number 15, Sho taking on Shingo Takagi, New Japan Cup. With the long hiatus that New Japan had this year, the New Japan Cup being the first big thing that they came back to do, empty arena, but Sho and Shingo demonstrated what you can do even in front of no fans to entertain an audience. Number 14, Kazuchika Okada versus Kota Ibushi. This was an incredible match, but I believe the hype of it brought down the ratings, and I was expecting a lot from this match going into it, and it delivered, but I don't think it delivered to the extent. But I've also been told I am by far the low person on this from everyone I've talked to online. Number 13, Matt Riddle and Pete Dunne taking on Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly, NXT Takeover Portland. This match was so much fun. I've been a huge fan of the Red Dragon combination and of Undisputed Era of Fish and O'Reilly for years. One of my favorite tag teams in the world, and Matt Riddle and Pete Dunne held their own and were an incredibly fun tag team to watch, both with their vignettes and in the ring, and this match totally delivered. Number 12, Kazuchika Okada taking on Tetsuya Naito. If you know me, you know I am not the biggest fan of Tetsuya Naito, especially his matches. This one showed off what he can do and was a lot of fun to watch. This is where he finally wins both gold at the Tokyo Dome, telling an incredible story that New Japan has laid out for these last few years. Number 11, Priscilla Kelly versus Thunder Rosa for the NWA Women's Championship, NWA Shockwave. This originally aired in September, but it now re-aired as part of Shockwave, and now everyone started to buzz about it. An incredibly aggressive match between two insanely talented women, and they hold no bars, just went out of there and delivered. And I'm so happy that so many people finally watched this match and are giving both of these women props. Number 10, Cody versus Orange Cassidy for the TNT title, AEW Dynamite, October 16th. So this was the first time they faced each other in AEW, the first of their matches that ended up going to a 20-minute time limit draw. And I thought that was a brilliant move. Once again, establishing the time limit for AEW and pushing and keeping the momentum going for Orange Cassidy after his Chris Jericho feud. And Cody's already established and has been super delivering with all of these open challenges. Jon Moxley versus Lance Archer. Texas Death Match. New Japan Pro Wrestling. Wrestle Kingdom. This was a fight, and I loved it. Incredibly violent. Just violent. I mean, it was a Texas death match after all. They would later follow this up in AEW in another really solid match, but this is the one that as soon as they started to tease Lance Archer being the contender to Jon Moxley's title, I was like, oh, they're going to have an absolutely brilliant match on Dynamite. And they did. And it was because of this Wrestle Kingdom match that I had the faith in that. Number 8, Minoru Suzuki versus Shingo Takagi. New Japan Pro Wrestling Summer Struggle. This was the outdoor stadium, Jingu Stadium show, and it was such a cool atmosphere. Even though the crowd could only clap, that wasn't a big deal in this match because it was so aggressive and so violent. We had the lariat exchange, the slap exchanges, Minoru Suzuki winning with the Gotch pile driver, and winning his Never title back against Shingo. They had multiple matches this year. I can recommend all of them, but this match in particular is the one that you should go out of your way to see. Number 7, Go Shiozaki versus Takeshi Sugiura. Pro Wrestling Noah, The Final Chronicle. I jump in and out of Pro Wrestling Noah, but this one was free on their television partner's website, and so I had to check it out, especially once I heard so many good things about it. And it was nearly an hour of brutality. Ghost Shiozaki fighting from behind and giving everything as his arms are nearly falling off. Number 6, Best Friends versus Santana and Ortiz. AEW Dynamite, September 16th. This was the infamous parking lot brawl. You'll notice on this list, I love all the physicality. Like, you can't do it all the time, but when you build up a story like Santana and Ortiz versus Best Friends, ending with this crazy, bloody brawl in the parking lot was so much fun. Chuck Taylor is one of the best people in this style. Trent, if any of you have followed his career, or even going back to New Japan, he is always willing to put his body on the line. And Santana and Ortiz are one of the best tag teams out there, and they are great at these brawls as well. So this was a lot of fun to watch. Number 5, Kazuchika Okada versus Shingo Takagi. New Japan Pro Wrestling G1 Climax. You'll notice that Okada is not as prevalent this year, and that's because he was changing his style around, and that led to a little bit lesser of a in-ring quality. But when he was given the opportunity to step up, like this match against Shingo, he over-delivered. Even with telling the story that he no longer wanted to use the Rainmaker and using the submission for the money clip instead, Okada put on an amazing match, even pulling out the original spinning version of the Rainmaker, but still holding off, hitting that big lariat for a later date. Number 4, Walter versus Ilya Dragunov, NXT UK. By far the most brutal match that I have seen WWE put out. The brutality that each of them showed and the extra aggressive nature from both of them. Walter would not stop beating on Ilya Dragunov. And Ilya Dragunov, I haven't always been the biggest fan of. This match, it worked for me. And he just showed a different level that he can do, taking that beating from Walter and being crazy enough to keep fighting until basically his body gave way, was an incredibly fun story to watch. Number 3, Will Ospreay versus Hiromu Takahashi, Wrestle Kingdom. An incredibly fantastic story. Will Ospreay had completely dominated the junior heavyweight division, and the last person that he had yet to face was Hiromu Takahashi. And Hiromu, much like speaking in the previous match with Ilya Dragunov, Hiromu's the only person who was crazy enough to bring everything at Will Ospreay. This featured probably one of my favorite sequences of the entire year, where Will Ospreay went out for the dive, Hiromu, who got out of the way, launched him back into the ring. Then Will Ospreay went, hit the Sasuke special. Incredible sequence. I cannot speak highly enough of this match. Number 2, Kenny Omega and Hangman Page taking on the Young Bucks, AEW Revolution. This was one of my favorite tag team matches I've ever seen. Bringing in so many different elements and telling such an interesting story between Omega, the Young Bucks, Hangman Page and the Young Bucks. You know, it brought a lot of parallels to a couple years ago, which was my match of the year in 2018, the Young Bucks versus the Golden Lovers. And it told a similar story, but in a different way. Go out of your way to check this out. Find the replay. Number 1, Hiromu Takahashi versus El Desperado. Best of Super Juniors finals. It's 2 years in a row. The Best of the Super Juniors final is once again my match of the year. And this was a completely different story than last year's. Last year was Will Ospreay versus Shingo Takagi. This year we had an amazingly told story. Hiromu Takahashi and El Desperado were young lions together. They trained together in the New Japan dojo. And when Hiromu left and El Desperado left, because New Japan sends people on excursion to get more or learning elsewhere, El Desperado was the first one to come back, but he came back in a mask. Hiromu came back, and he said, "Oh, I recognize that guy," but he's afraid to show his face. And he kept tweaking and prodding at El Desperado. But El Desperado, bringing that level of familiarity to his work with Hiromu, found him, and they have hated each other for years in the ring. You know, with that prodding of, "Oh, you're too afraid to show your face, you're too afraid to be yourself." El Desperado gets his mask ripped off, the top half, but then willingly said, "You think I'm afraid to show my face?" Takes off the mask completely, and the two of them just start brawling for the last portion of this match. And the excitement level, even though the crowd could only clap, they definitely disobeyed the rules and were oohing and eyeing as El Desperado takes off the mask. And it led to an incredibly fun match. Thanks for watching this. Hope you like all the recommendations. Make sure to like and subscribe, and follow me at Knocked Out Films. Thanks.